What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Alpha Lodge. Today we're diving into something that sounds like it is straight out of a psychology textbook, but trust me, this affects every single one of us in our daily lives. We're talking about the dark triad and the light triad. Now, before you tune out thinking this is going to be some academic lecture, stick with me. Because understanding these concepts isn't just about labeling people as good or bad. It is about understanding the full spectrum of human personality, recognizing these traits in ourselves and others, and most importantly, understanding that we have a choice in which direction we develop. So let's break it down. The dark triad consists of three personality traits that psychologists have been studying for decades: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. And no, this isn't about diagnosing people with disorders. These are subclinical traits, meaning they exist on a spectrum in all of us, to varying degrees. Narcissism is probably the most familiar one. We're talking about grandiosity, that sense of specialness, the constant need for admiration, and a lack of empathy for others. You know, that person who always needs to be the center of attention, who can't handle any criticism, who seems to view relationships as tools for their own ego. That is narcissism at play. Then there is Machiavellianism, named after Niccolò Machiavelli, the Renaissance philosopher who basically wrote the playbook on manipulation. High Machs are cynical, they're calculating. They view life as a chess game where people are pieces to be moved around. They're the masters of strategic flattery, of saying what you want to hear while secretly working toward their own agenda. They don't believe in morality, they believe in outcomes. And finally, psychopathy. This is the darkest of the dark. We're talking about impulsivity, lack of remorse, emotional coldness, and a predatory nature. Psychopaths don't just lack empathy, they often enjoy causing harm. They're the ones who can lie to your face without breaking a sweat, who view other people as objects to be used and discarded. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Research shows that these traits aren't just random. They share a common core: callousness, a fundamental lack of concern for others. And while people high in dark triad traits might achieve short-term success, getting that promotion, winning that argument, attracting that partner, the research is crystal clear. In the long run, these traits destroy relationships, careers, and ultimately, the person themselves. But here is what I really want to focus on today. In 2019, psychologist Scott Barry Kaufman and his colleagues introduced something called the light triad. And this is where we shift from pathology to possibility. The light triad consists of three traits that are essentially the antidote to the darkness: humanism, Kantianism, and faith in humanity. Humanism is about valuing the dignity and worth of every individual. It is the belief that people across all backgrounds deserve respect and appreciation. When you score high in humanism, you genuinely enjoy listening to people, learning from them, understanding their unique perspectives. You don't see people as obstacles or tools. You see them as fellow travelers on this journey. Kantianism comes from the philosopher Immanuel Kant, who argued that we should treat people as ends in themselves, never merely as means to an end. High scorers in Kantianism don't view relationships transactionally. When they talk to you, they're not calculating what they can get from you. They're present, they're authentic, they value you for who you are, not for what you can do for them. And faith in humanity is exactly what it sounds like. The belief that people are fundamentally good, that they have good intentions, that the world is a place where trust and cooperation are possible. This isn't naive optimism. It is a chosen perspective that opens doors to connection and collaboration that cynicism slams shut. Now, here is the crucial insight from the research. The dark triad and light triad aren't just opposites. They're only moderately negatively correlated. What does that mean in plain English? It means you can have some dark traits and some light traits. It means growth is possible. It means we're not doomed by our worst tendencies. And this is where I want to get practical, because the Alpha Lodge isn't just about understanding concepts. It is about becoming better men and women. The research shows that empathy, compassion, and altruism can be cultivated. They're not fixed traits. They're skills that can be developed with practice. Let's talk about how studies have shown that compassion training literally changes the brain. In one study from the University of Wisconsin, Madison, participants underwent just 2 weeks of compassion meditation training. The results: they showed increased altruistic behavior and changes in neural responses to suffering. 2 weeks. That is it. The training was simple. Participants practiced cultivating feelings of compassion for different targets: a loved one themselves, a stranger, and even a difficult person. They did this for 30 minutes a day, and it worked. Brain scans showed changes in areas associated with empathy and emotional regulation. Behaviorally, they were more likely to help others, even at a cost to themselves. This is huge. It means that regardless of where you fall on these spectrums right now, change is possible. But it requires intentional practice. So how do we cultivate the light triad in our own lives? Let's break it down practically. First, empathy development. The research on narcissism shows something fascinating. Narcissists don't necessarily lack cognitive empathy, the ability to understand what others are thinking. What they often lack is effective empathy, the ability to feel what others are feeling. But here is the good news: perspective. Taking exercises can help. Simply instructing someone to take the perspective of a suffering person can reduce their lack of empathy. Practice this. When you are in a conversation, don't just wait for your turn to speak. Actually try to feel what the other person is feeling. Ask yourself, what would it be like to be in their situation right now? This isn't just a mental exercise. It is a neural one. You are literally building new pathways in your brain. Second, mindfulness. Studies show that mindfulness practices help develop greater self-awareness and emotional regulation. For those with dark traits, this is crucial because it creates a pause between impulse and action. It gives you that moment of reflection where you can choose a different response. Try this. Before you react to a trigger, take 3 breaths. Just 3. In that space, ask yourself, is this reaction going to build connection or destroy it? Is this about my ego or is this about what is actually happening? Third, active listening. This is a game changer. Most people listen to respond. They listen to formulate their next argument, their next story, their next piece of advice. Active listening means listening to understand. It means putting aside your own agenda completely and focusing entirely on the other person's perspective. Practice this. In your next conversation, don't interrupt. Don't offer solutions unless asked. Just listen, reflect back what you are hearing, and ask questions that help the other person go deeper. You'll be amazed at how this transforms your relationships. Fourth, seek feedback. This is hard for everyone, but especially for those with dark traits. Ask trusted friends, family, or mentors for honest feedback about how you show up in relationships. And here is the key: don't defend yourself. Just listen, thank them, and reflect on it later. This builds humility, and humility is the gateway to growth. Now, let's talk about why this matters from an evolutionary perspective. Some researchers argue that dark triad traits evolved as short-term mating strategies, as ways to get ahead quickly through manipulation and exploitation. And in certain contexts, they might work temporarily. But the research is clear. Long-term, these strategies fail. They lead to broken relationships, isolation, and ultimately, misery. The light triad, on the other hand, correlates with life satisfaction, secure attachments, intellectual curiosity, and genuine success. Not the flashy look-at-me success of the narcissist, but the deep, lasting success of someone who has built something meaningful with others. Here is what I want you to take away from this. You are not your worst traits. We all have shadows. We all have moments of selfishness, manipulation, callousness, but we also all have the capacity for light. The question isn't whether you have dark traits. The question is which ones you feed. Every interaction is a choice. Every day, you decide whether to approach the world as a predator or as a partner. You decide whether to see others as obstacles to overcome or as fellow travelers worthy of respect. You decide whether your legacy will be one of extraction or contribution. The research is clear. People high in light triad traits report higher life satisfaction, stronger relationships, better physical health, and a deeper sense of meaning. They sleep better at night because they're not guarding a web of lies. They age better because they're not carrying the physiological burden of chronic hostility. And when they face the inevitable hardships of life, they have a support network to catch them because they invested in people rather than using them. But here is the most important finding. The light triad isn't the opposite of the dark triad. They're not mutually exclusive. You can have moments of narcissism and still choose empathy. You can recognize Machiavellian impulses and decide against them. You can feel the pull of psychopathic detachment and consciously reconnect. This is what makes us human. The capacity to notice our darker instincts and choose differently. The ancient Greeks had a concept called arete, excellence of character. Not perfection, but the daily practice of moving toward your better self. They understood that virtue isn't something you have. It is something you do. It is a verb, not a noun. Every time you choose to listen instead of dominate, to give instead of take, to see the good in someone instead of exploiting their weakness, you are building your light triad muscles. So where do you start? Start with radical honesty about where you are. Take an honest inventory of your relationships. Are they transactions or connections? Look at your recent conflicts. Did you seek to understand or to win? Examine your proudest moments. Were they about your achievement or about lifting someone else up? Then practice small acts of daily altruism. Hold the door. Remember someone's name. Ask how they're doing, and actually wait for the answer. These aren't just niceties. They're neural training. You are literally rewiring your brain to find reward in connection rather than conquest. Engage with perspectives that challenge you. Read books by people who see the world differently. Have conversations that make you uncomfortable. The light triad thrives on cognitive flexibility, the ability to hold your own views lightly and genuinely consider others. And finally, find a community that values these traits. We become the average of the people we spend the most time with. If you are surrounded by cynics and manipulators, the dark triad will feel like survival. If you are surrounded by people who believe in human potential, the light triad becomes contagious. The Alpha Lodge isn't about being perfect. It is about being intentional. It is about recognizing that we all have shadows, but choosing to face the light. It is about understanding that real strength isn't domination. It is the courage to be vulnerable, to care, to invest in something bigger than yourself. The world doesn't need more predators. It needs more partners. It needs people who can see the darkness clearly, but choose to build something illuminated. That choice is yours, moment by moment, day by day. So what is it going to be? The darkness is easy. It is the path of least resistance, the default mode of a scared ego. The light is harder. It requires effort, awareness, and the willingness to be hurt. But it is the only path that leads anywhere worth going. Choose the light, not because you are naive about the darkness, but because you've seen it and decided there is a better way. That is the alpha way, not the dominance of the wolf, but the leadership of the shepherd, protecting, guiding, elevating. The choice is yours. It always has been. Thanks for watching. If this resonated, subscribe to the Alpha Lodge. And remember, the light isn't weak. It is just harder to kill.